Chapter 3 of the Riddle of the Sands. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gesine. The Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Childers. Chapter 3 Davies. I dozed but fitfully, with a fretful sense of sore elbows and neck, and many a draughty hiatus among the blankets. It was broad daylight before I had reached the stage of torpor in which such slumber merges. That was finally broken by the descent through the skylight of a torrent of water. I started up, bumped my head hard against the decks, and blinked leaden-eyed upwards. "Sorry, I'm scrubbing decks. Come up and bathe. Slept well?" I heard a voice saying from aloft. "Fairly well," I growled, stepping out into a pool of water on the oilcloth. Thence I stumbled up the ladder, dived overboard, and buried bad dreams, stiffness, frowsiness, and tormented nerves on the loveliest fjord of the lovely Baltic. A short and furious swim, and I was back again, and searching for a means of ascent up the smooth black side, which, low as it was slippery and unsympathetic. Davies, in a loose canvas shirt, with the sleeves tucked up and flannels rolled up to the knee, hung over me with a rope's end and chatted unconcernedly about the easiness of the job when you know how, adjuring me to mind the paint, and talking about an accommodation ladder he had once had, but had thrown overboard because it was so horribly in the way. When I arrived, my knees and elbows were picked out in black paint, to his consternation. Nevertheless, as I plied the towel, I knew that I had left in those limpid depths yet another crust of discontent and self-conceit. As I dressed into flannels and blazer, I looked round the deck, and with an unskilled and doubtful eye took in all that the darkness had hitherto hidden. She seemed very small. In point of fact, she was 7 tons, something over 30 feet in length and 9 in beam, a size very suitable to weekends in the Solent for such as liked that sort of thing. But that she should have come from Dover to the Baltic suggested a world of physical endeavour of which I had never dreamed. I passed to the aesthetic side. Smartness and beauty were essential to yachts in my mind, but with the best resolves to be pleased, I found little encouragement here. The hull seemed too low, and the mainmast too high. The cabin roof looked clumsy, and the skylights saddened the eye with dull iron and plebeian graining. What brass there was, on the tiller-head and elsewhere, was tarnished with sickly green. The decks had none of that creamy purity which Cowes expects, but were rough and grey, and showed tarry exhalations round the seams, and rusty stains near the bows. The ropes and rigging were in mourning when contrasted with the delicate buff manila, so satisfying to the artistic eye as seen against the blue of a June sky at South Sea. Nor was the whole effect bettered by many signs of recent refitting. An impression of paint, varnish, and carpentry was in the air. A gaudy new burgee fluttered aloft. There seemed to be a new rope or two, especially round the diminutive mizzen mast, which itself looked altogether new. But all this only emphasised the general plainness, reminding one of a respectable woman of the working classes trying to dress above her station, and soon likely to give it up. That the ensemble was businesslike and solid, even my untrained eye could see. Many of the deck fittings seemed disproportionately substantial. The anchor chain looked contemptuous of its charge. The binnacle with its compass was of a size and prominence almost comically impressive, and was, moreover, the only piece of brass which was burnished and showed traces of reverent care. 2 huge coils of stout and dingy warp lay just abaft the mainmast, and summed up the weather-beaten aspect of the little ship. I should add here that in the distant past she had been a lifeboat, and had been clumsily converted into a yacht by the addition of a counter, deck, and the necessary spars. She was built, as all lifeboats are, diagonally of 2 skins of teak, and thus had immense strength, though, in the matter of looks, all a hybrid's failings. Hunger and "Tea's made" from below brought me down to the cabin, where I found breakfast laid out on the table over the centreboard case, with Davies earnestly presiding, rather flushed as to the face, and sooty as to the fingers. There was a slight shortage of plate and crockery, but I praised the bacon and could do so truthfully, for its crisp and steaming shavings would put to shame the efforts of my London cook. Indeed, I should have enjoyed the meal heartily, were it not for the lowness of the sofa and table, causing a curvature of the body which made swallowing a more lengthy process than usual, and induced a periodical yearning to get up and stretch, a relief which spelt disaster to the skull. I noticed, too, that Davies spoke with a zest sinister to me of the delights of white bread and fresh milk, which he seemed to consider unusual luxuries, though suitable to an inaugural banquet in honour of a fastidious stranger. "One can't be always going on shore," he said, when I showed a discreet interest in these things. "I lived for 10 days on a big rye loaf over in the Frisian Islands." "And it died hard, I suppose?" "Very hard, but," gravely, "quite good. After that I taught myself to make rolls. Had no baking powder at first, so used Eno's fruit salt. But they wouldn't rise much with that. As for milk, condensed is—I hope you don't mind it?" I changed the subject and asked about his plans. "Let's get under way at once," he said, "and sail down the fjord." I tried for something more specific, but he was gone, and his voice drowned in the forecastle by the clatter and swish of washing up. Thenceforward events moved with bewildering rapidity. Humbly desirous of being useful, I joined him on deck, only to find that he scarcely noticed me, save as a new and unexpected obstacle in his round of activity. He was everywhere at once, heaving in chain, hooking on halyards, hauling ropes, while my part became that of the clown who does things after they are already done, for my knowledge of a yacht was of that floating and inaccurate kind which is useless in practice. Soon the anchor was up, a great rusty monster it was, the sails set, and Davies was darting swiftly to and fro between the tiller and jib sheets, while the Dulcibella bowed a lingering farewell to the shore and headed for the open fjord. Erratic puffs from the high land behind made her progress timorous at first, but soon the fairway was reached, and a true breeze from Flensburg and the west took her in its friendly grip. Steadily she rustled down the calm blue highway, whose soft beauty was the introduction to a passage in my life, short but pregnant with moulding force, through stress and strain for me and others. Davies was gradually resuming his natural self, with abstracted intervals, in which he lashed the helm to finger a distant rope, with such speed that the movements seemed simultaneous. Once he vanished, only to reappear in an instant with a chart, which he studied while steering, with a success that its reluctant folds seemed to render impossible. Waiting respectfully for his revival, I had full time to look about. The fjord here was about a mile broad. From the shore we had left, the hills rose steeply, but with no rugged grandeur. The outlines were soft, there were green spaces and rich woods on the lower slopes, a little white town was opening up in one place, and scattered farms dotted the prospect. The other shore, which I could just see, framed between the gunwale and the mainsail, as I sat leaning against the hatchway and sadly missing a deck chair, was lower and lonelier, though prosperous and pleasing to the eye. Spacious pastures led up by slow degrees to ordered clusters of wood, which hinted at the presence of some great manor house. Behind us, Flensburg was settling into haze. Ahead, the scene was shut in by the contours of hills, some clear, some dreamy and distant. Lastly, a single glimpse of water shining between the